boogeyman. As a matter of fact, it was.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Geekfest Rants. Today we have a special episode. Don't we always have a special episode? This special episode is a John Carpenter special. We have two extra people, or one additional, depends on how you see it. We have our usual Steve Ivona with us. Say hi, Steve.
Hey, Carlos.
And we have another Steve Laux, another one of our Geekfest Rants members. Say hi, Steve.
Hey there, how you guys doing?
Okay,
Cool.
It's Revenge of the Steves.
Well, one of the reasons I want to explain why we're doing John Carpenter, since that's a name that doesn't seem to pop up lately too much in the media. He apparently is coming out with a new movie after about 10 years of not doing anything, or at least not in the in films, in actual theatrical releases. Right? He seems to be coming out with something. There's a trailer out that we'll probably talk about it too. That seems interesting. It seems very modern and him coming back to his original genre of horror. The other thing is that there's a prequel to his remake of The Thing that's coming out that apparently he's not involved, but it's something that it's like, oh, wait a minute, this kind of comes back to John Carpenter again.
Yeah.
So let's start in the beginning in some of his early films, and let's just work our way up. The first one is Dark Star. Do any of you guys know anything about that film? Because I've never seen it.
If I saw it once, and it was ages ago.
I don't believe I've actually ever seen the whole film.
That's funny because I actually have a copy of it, but I have not watched it. And for some reason,
too.
I get the feeling that it's almost like a student film because from what the clips that I've seen, it's like it's very rough, very super independent, almost experimental, like how rough it is.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, it's supposed to be a science fiction comedy. Is that what you get?
Something along those lines. He did it with Dan O'Bannon, who went on to write Alien.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really was a student film. I'm not positive. I can't say for sure if it's truly a student film or not. But
now wait a minute. You were supposed to be the expert on John Carpenter.
Well,
and now you're telling me
our homework assignment is to go and watch Dark Star as soon as we this
there we go. I'll watch it tonight.
I really started.
Do you know if it was successful at all, or if it?
I think it got him noticed. I think it
was 1974, from what I understand.
I mean, I think it put him on the map to a certain extent because right after that he did Assault on Precinct 13, which that's another independent film, but I mean that it's slowly you could see him slowly inching up from Dark Star to Assault on Precinct 13, and then of course to Halloween, kind of notching up the independent ladder.
Right. Well, let's go to Assault on Precinct 13 then. I saw that obviously not in the theater, but I saw it probably through one of our get-togethers or right around that time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is what I would not consider it one of his masterpieces, but it's something that definitely you saw the beginning of his greatness.
Style,
He had no budget as usual. But you could see there was something about this guy that made it work, that made it interesting, that it stood out from your typical, 70s exploitation violence film. It made it a little creepy and scary and different.
Yes.
How about you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I had to just use one word to describe that film, it's raw. I mean, the fact that they kill a kid
with the ice cream.
I mean, that just blew me away. It's at that point, that.
Especially in the 70s.
Exactly. That this guy's, he's not going to pull any punches. He's just going to let this story happen and just complete anarchy unfold.
Right. I think it's one thing worth mentioning about him in general, and especially with this film, is a lot of his films are homages to films that he loved growing up. And Assault on Precinct 13 is essentially not a remake, but it's in the mold of Rio Bravo, one of John Wayne's movies. And this whole idea of being under siege and people banding together who you wouldn't necessarily see banding together. But I agree. It's a gritty, down and dirty film. Austin Stoker is the lead. And this is something we can get into as we discuss him. But I think he's a master at casting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he will always pick the person you don't expect, and it'll turn out brilliantly. And that will really play itself out in a couple more films from here. But he takes these guys who you just wouldn't expect to be a lead, and there you have it.
Kurt Russell, for one.
There you go. That's who I was alluding to. Yeah.
Not to jump ahead, but I mean,
Yeah.
up until that point, it was like, what? The guy from the Disney movies? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Snake Plissken?
Totally.
Another thing that I noticed about this particular movie that carries on to some of his other movies is that the bad guy is kind of like a nameless, faceless person. These gang members, you really don't know much about him except what you learn in the beginning, that it's all some kind of a revenge thing for I think killing some gang members, but you never see any kind of real unified strategy or anything. It's just an onslaught of people coming towards them.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it even creepier. The fact that you don't know what's coming. I don't want to say it's a supernatural kind of thing, but it kind of inches towards there without crossing the line into the horror supernatural realm.
Mm-hmm.
What category would you say Assault on Precinct 13 is? It's action, thriller.
I would say thriller suspense. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree that it's not quite like an exploitation film, but I don't know. It gets kind of close. In terms of.
No, I was gonna say it's like Steve said. It's the 70s rawness about it. The gritty. Not so much student film, but indie film kind of look that makes it even harder. It's a harder film.
And I think too. I mean, even. Another point I think I'd like to make here is that whenever he was constrained by studio interference, the product suffered. And I think that these early films are among his best because he was able to do whatever he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
These are independent films, and they were, as soon as he got under the studio's thumb, something went wrong. And I think that the Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, Escape from New York. Well, I mean, even though The Thing is a studio film, he still kind of went and did his own thing. I think that this is really shades of things to come. How great he was.
Right. Even though he technically at some point does get involved with big time studio productions, he still manages to keep an independent kind of flavor to all of his material.
There's never any mistaking a Carpenter film.
Right.
Any way.
Well, we'll talk about that.
I'll come.
Now, do any of you guys know and I'm sure because since this is probably one of his biggest Halloween. How did he get involved with that? How did he make the jump from one to the other? Because this is the movie that put him on the map.
Right.
His next film, Halloween, 1978.
If my information is correct, the idea for Halloween was suggested to him by one of the producers, whose name is Irwin Yablans, and he said, you could do this film that, based on, babysitter being menaced by a stalker. So I don't believe Carpenter originated the concept, but he took the concept and just went and did his own thing. He wrote the screenplay with Deborah Hill.
Mm-hmm.
He did the music, and he was still, again, working on a relatively small budget. And did his own thing. One interesting thing is the part of Dr. Loomis was originally offered to Christopher Lee. He turned it down.
Wow.
Who turned it down and later said that it was one of the biggest regrets in his career that he. Although I can't see anybody else but Donald Pleasance.
I know. Now it's different.
The evil is here.
And then he became one of Carpenter's stock players after that. Pleasance. So yeah, I mean, it was just another outside the studio venture, and he at a time when you were really, a lot of people say that Halloween is the beginning of the slasher genre, and I don't. I mean, there's very little blood in it, and
maybe it's the beginning of the copycat slasher genre.
I think you had later movies like Friday the 13th that went for buckets of blood, but Halloween relies on suspense, I think, more than anything else. And
now,
so go ahead.
At that time, was he married to Deborah Hill?
I think he was definitely in a relationship with her. I don't know if they were definitely partnered professionally by then. She's a co-writer on the script.
Because they had a good run there. There seemed to be that period where they were, a good tag team effort. And
Absolutely.
what's interesting about Halloween is it's very similar to the set of circumstances surrounding a film like Star Wars, where it's an independent film, have a little bit of a budget. You have all of these talented people who are just about to break through. You have Jamie Lee Curtis, and
Right.
again, they had a budget, but it was still relatively a shoestring budget,
Mhm.
and everything just worked. You had Dean Cundey as the director of photography,
Right.
and just look at how his career has grown and progressed.
Mhm.
To think of all these young adults just having fun and making a movie
Yep.
about the boogeyman.
Yep.
And then what you see on celluloid, to me, is very impressive. It's my number one horror film of all time. I would still call it a horror film
Mhm.
in the classic sense.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I mean, whenever they do these lists of the top 10 or the top 100 of anything,
Mhm.
as far as horror goes, this is there. I mean, you could kind of throw it in the 70s as one of these 1970s classics,
Mhm.
because it's, you have your Psycho, and you
Yeah.
have your Halloweens, you have your
Chainsaw
your
Massacre. Yeah.
right, you have it's like
Just-
it's like your basic food groups
Yeah.
Right.
And
of
definitely
horror.
Right.
that. I think what also bears mentioning too is the score. I mean, this is again one of his trademarks
Mhm.
is doing his own scores, and this score it just is perfect.
Mhm.
I mean, it fits the film beautifully. It contributes to the suspense beautifully, and it's something he just kept going on and on with. Again, there's no mistaking a Carpenter score.
Definitely. Now, if you go up the list here, they list something called Someone's Watching Me as a TV movie
Mhm.
in the same year as Halloween. Do any of you guys know anything about this?
No, not really.
I know
Seems
of
kinda
it, but I never saw it.
Huh. And it just
Yeah,
seems odd
me
that they
neither.
released something like that at the same year as Halloween. Now, this is followed by Elvis, which apparently was a very critically acclaimed film.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah,
where
and
it
that's-
up with Kurt Russell.
Right. Yeah, that's where that relationship started.
Mhm.
I've never seen it, but I've always heard good things about it, and I've heard that Kurt Russell did a great job.
How about you, Steve? Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, me neither. That's another one we have. It's one of these catch-up films.
Yeah.
Now, up next, 1980, we have The Fog, which it's definitely in the horror genre. You could kind of say it kind of takes a little from Halloween in terms of the suspense aspect of it.
True.
It's his style, so it's, in other words, yes, it's a different subject matter, but his fingerprints are all over it.
Mhm.
And once again, he casts somebody who then we'll see in some of his future films. What did you guys think of The Fog?
I thought it was great. I thought it
Yeah.
was great. I love the. I mean, I like the setting of it. The the region where they shot the film. It really added to the atmosphere. And again, talk about perfect casting. I mean, just go down the list: Hal Holbrook,
Adrian
Janet Leigh,
Barbeau,
Adrian
Barbeau, that's
Barbeau. What was the guy? Who's
Tom Atkins.
Tom Atkins.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, again, who is this guy? And then again, you
Yeah.
see him in subsequent films.
Right.
But it just worked really well. Again, it seemed like you had these people that we just stumble upon their random lives, and then they all come into this very messy interaction with each other. And they're all thrown into this situation where nobody knows what the hell is going on.
Right. Yeah.
No, and one thing that I also find very interesting about Carpenter and his films, especially his early films, is that he's great at setting up the scenes. He's setting up the story. It's almost like Stephen King in terms of Stephen King is great at setting up a story. The endings you might not be too crazy about, but he sets the mood and lets you go with it. And The Fog is a perfect example.
Mhm.
It's not the greatest of his films, but the setup is really good, very creepy, and like once you're in it, it's like, okay, where are we going now? Where are we going with this?
Mhm.
Very creepy.
And what was
movie.
interesting about that is it turned out to be a special effects nightmare because they could not get the fog to stay, so they wound up having to do all kinds of tricks and playing things in reverse to get the fog to behave the way they wanted it to.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes that's best things have these happy accidents, like with Jaws. I
Right.
mean, if something's
Right.
not working right,
Mhm.
it forces them to come up with things on the spot and things like that. From what I understand, he didn't like the original cut of The Fog and was
Mhm.
not happy with it, and he did a lot of reshoots. And from what I gather, it's not one of his favorite films, but I think the atmosphere is great. completely creepy. I love Adrienne Barbeau as the DJ. Her voice in that, she's really got this
That's right.
sensuous voice.
Mhm.
I really kind of dug that. This is, I think, the first time where you really see him building an ensemble,
Mhm.
and really taking people who you wouldn't. He's bringing back people like Jamie Lee Curtis, who he works well with, and adding other actors. And he seems to be brilliant at casting the right people and people you just would not think of for certain roles. And then, of course, he has his stock players like George Buck Flower and guys like that, who seem to appear in all his films. But no, I think The Fog is a classic. I really do, and you don't even see the ghosts. You really don't get a good look at them.
No, not
you
too
don't.
much.
Throughout.
I wonder if he got upset when they made Pirates of the Caribbean, because if you think about it, it's kind of like the same story. It's the
Yeah.
the ghosts of these pirates kind of thing
Mhm.
are coming back for their gold,
Mhm.
more
Yeah.
or less.
Yeah.
Now, do any of you guys know? Because I remember hearing that he had nothing to do with Halloween 2, except that he did contribute to the writing of it. I think it was,
I believe he.
and the music.
I believe he co-wrote the script. I know he did. He did not direct it.
No.
But I do believe he has a screenwriter credit, and I think they just recycled the score from Halloween 1.
Wow.
But no, he definitely had some involvement in it.
Wow. Up next, we have Escape from New York.
All right.
All right.
For me, it's like one of the top three.
Absolutely.
It hits you from kind of both ends. It gives you the action and it gives you the sci-fi
Mhm.
also at the same time. And it's serious. It's not a campy kind of movie.
No.
It just hits everything exactly where you want it. And Kurt Russell, it's almost like they're a duo. Him and Carpenter in this film, it's almost like they're a pair. You
Mhm.
cannot separate these two people.
Right.
What did you guys think?
Oh, I think it's without question my favorite Carpenter film. I think everything fell into place. This is where Kurt Russell really blossomed. I don't know who else was considered, if anyone. This is was made for Embassy, so it's still it is considered somewhat of a studio film. And I don't know if they tried to force other actors on him, but this is where Kurt Russell blossomed, and Snake Plissken is a classic character. I mean, he's just such a badass. And again, you have an amazing ensemble, guys like Ernest Borgnine and Lee Van Cleef and Isaac Hayes and Harry Dean Stanton. These are people, who may not necessarily have been at the top of their game at the time, career-wise. Maybe Stanton, who was just an alien, but
Yeah.
the atmosphere, like you said, he takes everything seriously. It's got the sci-fi, it's got that dystopian view that Carpenter seems to have, that he sort of transfers onto Snake. That's this has no faith in humanity kind of a thing. I think Russell is what makes the film for me. I mean, he's just brilliant in the role.
I agree that, I mean, having all these strange actors that you would normally never see in the same kind of film, it works because it's kind of like, it's almost like going to a sci-fi convention and you see all these B actors together, and this is kind of what it's like. It's like, where else would you find all these has-beens in jail? They throw them all in one place, and there you go. You guys sort it out.
Yeah.
And you run into the most bizarre, from Isaac Hayes to Ernest Borgnine. It's like the most bizarre group of people ever.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I also like about this film is that it creates a whole new world. It's a whole new society that you're given to play with, including this whole other thing about these underground people that are like eating each other or something.
Yeah.
That it's like you think it's bad up top. Wait till you get to the bottom.
Right.
And it's just it's no rules, everything up in the air. And it makes you want to know even more about. In other words, they don't give you, in my opinion, they never give you enough about Plissken. You just want to know more and more about him, which was great when years later they released the Laserdisc and the DVDs, and they showed you those extra scenes of the robbery.
Mm-hmm.
It had extra music on it, and it was gold. That stuff was just great. Getting your hands on those extra scenes because, you just want more of that character, and they definitely deliver it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well,
Plus,
I liked it on a number of levels. You know, first and foremost, as a New Yorker, just the fact that they used Manhattan Island as
Yeah.
a jail, as a prison, which that just blew my mind. I mean, and this was the first Carpenter film that I actually saw, and got caught up on anything that had preceded it after the fact. But I actually saw it on the precursor to the Laserdisc at one of my buddies' houses who lived in the
Oh.
neighborhood. So I think we saw that. We saw Blowout with John Travolta, and there was probably a couple other movies. But I remember watching it and just thinking, to your point before about this world, this new world that was created, to think that you could take that world and just graft it over New York City right now. Because again, at the time, it really wasn't that far into the future. Relatively speaking, but I really appreciated that aspect of it. And again, the music and the casting, and I guess it's some, it's noteworthy that they couldn't shoot it in New York because it didn't look bad enough. They had to go shoot it in St. Louis, which there are actually still some parts of St. Louis I think that look that way still to this day. So that was really interesting.
but I agree with you, Steve. It's funny. I mean, after seeing the movie, sometimes you're in Manhattan or you see the skyline, and you're like, okay, that's where Snake crosses the bridge, and that's the place where that happened, and that's where the helicopters. It's they're like landmarks. All of a sudden, the movie becomes its own landmark.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't a young James Cameron actually get? He was involved with this. He helped create some of the models for the flight sequences and all that.
He started out as a model builder and like a set design and that kind of thing, construction and carpentry, and I think this was one of his earlier credits.
Yeah, definitely. What I love, is just that I think in this film more than the ones that preceded it. Although you could make the argument that the Assault on Precinct 13 sort of had this, just the cynical worldview that Carpenter seems to have.
Oh yeah,
and that he just refuses to deliver the happy ending. And that's one of the things I think I love most about him is just this fearlessness to not give you what you expect, especially at the end, and not tie it up in a neat little bow, and to say, you know what, people are really nasty, and that governments can't be trusted. It's this whole. I mean, I think Carpenter is sort of a child of the '60s and doesn't trust it. I think in Escape from New York, especially, you really started to see his attitudes showing through. And again, you're so used to being force fed the typical studio endings and characters and everything. I noticed from a very early age that this guy was something different. I don't think Escape from New York was the first Carpenter film I ever saw, but once I was a teenager when I started seeing his films, and I just got right on board with him immediately because I knew this guy was something different.
Right. It's different when you watch a horror film, because in a horror film there is a tradition, not very new. It's been around for a while, and I think it's like some kind of European thing, like French films or something, where at the end they give you the twist ending, they give you the not so happy ending. But Escape from New York is not a horror film, so it's kind of like, okay, now we're seeing the weird ending on a more standard film, and it's like, that's kind of that tastes weird.
Yeah.
And we'll see. He'll carry that on some of his future films.
Right.
Now, let's move on to his next film, The Thing. And Steve, you can probably tell us about what this is a sequel, what this is a remake of.
Which Steve?
You,
Okay.
Mr. Vavona.
Okay. This is a remake of The Thing from Another World, which is a 1951 film, classic film, about an alien who can assume the forms of other people, who can take over. It doesn't really resemble the original film very much. And I think that, just to jump a little bit ahead, I think that's might have something to do with why it wasn't so well received at the time. The original Thing is a classic. And it's by a director who Carpenter absolutely adores, Howard Hawks. But Carpenter just went in a whole nother direction than that film, and but it's much more faithful to the original story, and it's about as bleak as it can get in terms of Carpenter's oeuvre, whatever you want to call it. Again, he's reteaming with Kurt Russell, right hot off Escape from New York. again, he assembles a terrific ensemble, including Wilford Brimley, that's one person who sticks out. Pre-Cocoon,
Yeah, that's right.
Wilford Brimley. And you're talking about a group of a research station where not great at synopsises, but that they come into contact with this dog that God, I'm losing it. Somebody pick this up.
The dog is apparently is infected in some
Right.
shape or form, and leads to the entire movie taking place of everybody one by one. They start dropping dead one by one.
Right.
The movie does have what you would call a classic Carpenter feel in terms of the suspense and the horror. It's that little by little something happens to everybody, kind of like Halloween. It's that kind of thing.
Yep.
Now the setting is great because you're in the middle of an ice surrounding environment, and
you can't get any more far removed from
right, and it
from
works.
civilization.
It's almost like a character. It's almost like an additional character in the film because you're always fighting that weather. You're always fighting the ice and the snow. But what this movie did, which I think was the big deal about it, was that it had some unbelievably nuts special effects.
Oh yeah, it totally.
Was it Rick Baker?
Yeah. Yeah, they broke some major ground, and they essentially told him, look, we need you to kick it up a notch. So if you have ideas, you really want to make this thing your own, by all means. And he really did take it to the next level. I mean, I could not believe what I was watching when I saw that film. I just could not believe it when they have the paddles on the guy.
Yes.
And his chest collapses,
Oh, forget it.
and it engulfs that guy, and then it turns into this new thing. It just kept changing and growing and getting more and more grotesque.
Did this movie ever have an X rating for the violence?
Oh, no.
Because I imagine it was probably on the border of that.
Well, I know the DVD and the Laserdisc before it had additional scenes that were, kind of nasty. So I'm assuming they probably had to cut it down.
Yeah.
For its time, it was just a lot of people have never seen something like that before.
No, and I think it's safe to say that it was a little bit ahead of its time. It had the distinction of being released in the summer of 1982, which probably was just about the worst time to put this film out. Carlos and I, in a previous podcast, had a discussion about 1982 and the films that came out then, and some. You had like a movie like Tron and another movie like The Thing just getting blown off the map by E.T.
Right.
And other films like Blade Runner and Star Trek 2. I mean, it was an overcrowded summer of science fiction.
Yeah, this was the flip side of E.T.
Yes,
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And Carpenter himself has said that he thought that E.T. had a negative impact on the box office for The Thing. I mean, I'm sure E.T. had a negative impact on the box office of
everybody.
Right.
But
weren't as many screens available back then.
No. And when you take a movie like The Thing that just didn't have the wide appeal and was very, very violent and scary and and R-rated and it didn't have a prayer. And it I think even though it has since become a classic, it was really Carpenter's first flop.
Yeah.
And that
Wow.
hit him home.
What I find most interesting is, you talk about the evolution of a filmmaker. The prior film being Escape from New York, where you could tell it was apparent who the good guys and the bad guys were for the most part. I mean, each one of them had different levels of goodness and badness, but in this one, I think that it was very interesting because they were tackling themes where you really don't know what people are thinking. You really don't know what their intentions are. And that is something that resonated with me because just think of your everyday life. You have no idea what other people are capable of. Yeah. And here you are, you have these guys, again, a very isolated place, trapped together, forced to have to deal with each other. And they don't even have the benefit of knowing at face value, is this person a human or not? Right. And what really terrified me was the fact that despite them being so isolated from the rest of civilization, sooner or later, somebody was going to find them. And this thing was going to just spread and wipe out humanity.
And once again, in a trademark kind of ending, they leave it completely wide open.
Open-ended.
You have no idea where it's going to go next, and you're happy that your hero's still alive, but your hero might be the bad guy for all you know. You just don't
Yeah.
know.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Now, this to me is the one of the top three. After this is kind of like, as far as I'm concerned, is the okay. Here are all his B films. His A films are Halloween, Escape from New York, and The Thing, and then there's everything else in my book.
Well, I don't know if my book doesn't jive with your book. I mean, you can make the argument that he peaked, but I don't think his output, at least for the rest of the '80s goes.
Mhm.
I loved,
Mm-hmm.
and I think
Me
Steve
too.
kind of feels similarly. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't think he started to lose it, if you want to even say that he lost it, until the '90s. And even I'm even a fan of some of the stuff from the '90s. But
We were still going to see those films.
yes,
I see it more as
together.
a
Yeah.
I see it more as a downward trend. In other words, it wasn't like he just dropped off to complete irrelevant films, but
No.
it kind of started sliding a little bit.
Okay.
And plus, the other thing was that he was pumping out like a movie every year.
He
I don't know
was.
how he was working so fast and so hard. I mean, I'm looking at the years here.
Mhm.
79, 80, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84. It's like it looks like he only took 1 year off in the 80s.
Yeah.
His next film after The Thing is Christine, which is a film version of a Stephen King book. Now, I remember reading the book. Interesting book, not one of his bests. But the thing about the Christine is that it wasn't the first time that I had seen a film based on the killer car concept. I remember seeing something from the 70s. I don't know if it was a TV movie or if it was an actual film with I think it was
Duel?
Josh Brolin.
Oh.
No, yeah, Duel was one. The other one was called The Car.
Oh yeah.
I think Brolin was the star.
Yes. I
And,
didn't see it. Yeah.
And it was, that concept, we've seen it before, so it wasn't that, wow, it's amazing. For me personally, what was interesting is the fact that, it's a Stephen King story. So, great. I know the concept of the evil car, but now I get to see a visual version of a Stephen King story about an evil car. But yeah, the other one was Duel, which is not so much an evil car, but I think it was like one crazy guy against what's his name?
Normal.
McLeod.
Yeah. Dennis Weaver.
That's him.
Yeah.
But what do you guys remember Christine?
I'm not a huge fan. As a matter of fact, I think this is probably, for me, I mean, you could make the argument that he's made worse films, but I think I saw it maybe twice and back in the 80s, and I didn't like it. And I really don't have a heck of a lot to say about it. Keith Gordon, who played the lead, I thought he was pretty good, but and I don't think this is so much Carpenter's fault, but I always found the original story kind of stupid, and it just didn't work for me, and I think it really didn't work as a movie. And I think this is also the first time where he's doing something not based on something he wrote.
Oh, wow.
And I just think it's now, unlike the film that follows it, I just think it's a complete misfire. And
I think it does have some redeeming qualities to it. I mean, for me, although I love the fact that there's this car killing people, and it was a cool car, to boot.
It was a cool car.
What I appreciated at the time, and I don't know, maybe it's just that it spoke to me on a personal level, was the whole bullying aspect.
Oh,
and
yeah.
People being pushed to their limits, and again, not really knowing how far are they going to push back. And the title character really, the main character really put up with a lot of abuse, and psychological and physical. And for him to lash out like that, again, he was prone to something, and the car just essentially tapped into that and accelerated his vengeful tendencies.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I like it. It's just for me. I appreciate it for what it is. I read the story as well, and I don't know. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, given it was a Stephen King story, it's a little similar if you really think about it to Carrie. It's the misfit that gets picked on, who takes revenge on everybody until it practically consumes that person in the process. So this definitely was a little bump in the road for John Carpenter. Now, up next is what I would consider to be one of the least like John Carpenter films that I've ever seen, Starman. Very successful. I think there were even some Oscar nominations thrown around for, I think, Jeff Bridges. But to me, it just never felt like a John Carpenter film. Not that's it's not a bad thing, but it just didn't have the feel of it. How about you guys?
I agree in that sense that it's one of the films that you could probably, if no one told you that he directed it, you might not pick it. But I love it. I think that first of all, I just think it proves that he's capable of more than just his, like I said, that sort of cynical. He brought a certain cynicism to all his films, except this one, and this one is just the opposite. And but it shows you that he can bring out emotion and the performances that he got out of Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen, who I think also deserves mention, is just. I think it's a beautiful film, and it's got its share of suspense. It's sort of a chase movie too, but just watching Bridges kind of trying to emulate humanity, but yet at the same time he's becoming a better person than your average human being in the process. And I think it's a sweet film. I think Bridges is brilliant, and I think Carpenter, from a technical standpoint, he nails it, and it's one of those films. At the end, you get a little misty at the end. I really think it's a terrific film.
I think the one of the highlights for me was, in seeing that film for the first time, I was confused in how I was supposed to feel. And I think that was intentional, because you do have this alien who is trying to become a human and trying to learn what it's like to be human. And, as a result, to your point, becomes more than that, and essentially shows humanity what kind of potential they do have to do good, and to just appreciate what it is that you have. And in subsequent viewings of it, that really comes through for me. But I remember seeing it for the first time, knowing that it was a John Carpenter film, and kind of not knowing what to make of it. I guess my expectation was established by that point. And in subsequent viewings, I've come to really love the film a lot. Jeff Bridges is my favorite actor, so I'll watch anything that he does. Yeah. But again, just great performances, and it wasn't perfect. It had these moments of it was just kind of strange. You don't really know what's supposed to happen, but that's the point. You never know what's going to happen, so you just kind of go along for the ride. And in the end, when it comes full circle, here he is. She's going to have his child. It's like, oh my God, where is this going? And then they came out with that horrendous TV show.
Robert Hayes. I forgot about that.
Oh, bad news.
Well, that was 1984, I believe, and what comes next is 2 years later, which is, like we said before, unusual. He actually takes a break, or maybe he's just continually working so hard that he doesn't have time to stop. Well, this is also the end of part 1 of our John Carpenter special. Please join us again next week when we will keep moving up the timeline through the John Carpenter history of films. We will finish off the 80s, head to the 90s, hit the 2000s, and all the way to the present on his newest film. I'd like to thank our two Steves, Steve Laux and Steve Ivona, for joining us. And to our listeners, please return next week for part 2 of our John Carpenter special. And thank you for joining us at Geekfest Rants.
What did I teach you?
You are Duke of New York. You're a #1.
I can't hear you.
You are the Duke of New York. You're a #1.